So, Fred, what motivated you to write Perfect Game?
Well, Jordan, I had coached kids' teams for years. In fact, I coached more than 30 different kids' teams. And I noticed that on most of the teams, there'd always be this kid who wanted to do everything perfectly. And he or she would, in fact, they wanted to do it so perfectly that really they played worse. They didn't want to make any mistakes, and they got upset about making mistakes. And so I wanted to write about that kid. And so in Perfect Game, I write about Isaac, who is a perfectionist. He wants to pitch a perfect game. And he gets upset when he doesn't. And so what I wanted him to do, though, was to then have his coach say, well, gee, I'd like you to help me with this basketball team. And it turns out to be a unified sports basketball team. And that's what gets Isaac to think a little bit differently about what it means to be perfect in sports or any place else.
What was your perception of people with intellectual disabilities when you were 13, Isaac's age, and how do you feel those perceptions have changed with kids today?
Well, I mean, when I was 13 years old, that was a long time ago. And frankly, I lived at a time when kids with intellectual disabilities were pushed aside. They were put into institutions and certainly were not included. And when I was Isaac's age, 13, I didn't really question that. But what I see now through watching unified sports, going to schools, I speak at a lot of schools, I see much more inclusion. I see many more times when the kids with either intellectual disabilities or physical disabilities are included with the other kids. And so we've come a long way in that way. And I think that's a really good thing. And certainly the kids today are much better with kids who have intellectual disabilities or some sort of physical handicap. They are much better than the kids were in my day.
In your opinion, how has Unified Sports created a more inclusive environment in schools and has better relationships between students with and without disabilities?
Well, you know, the interesting thing is for the book, I did a lot of research. And the way I researched the book was to go to watch unified basketball teams at Blessed Sacrament School in Washington, D.C., and at the Landon School in Bethesda. And so I can say what I saw there. And what I saw there were actually, it was a very inclusive environment. I talked to lots of kids and their parents who had been partners in unified sports for years, saw the kids with intellectual disabilities away from the games, considered them friends. They were always, and so, like I said, that's a very, very different environment from the one that I grew up in. The other thing, too, is that sports is a great way to break down barriers. When you're playing sports, you really care about, well, is this person that I'm playing with a good teammate? And anybody can be a good teammate. Anybody can be positive and try to help the team. And so that's a good way. It's a good place for kids, all kids, to meet, and you know, you start to see people differently, whether they're a good teammate or not a good teammate.
What would you say to someone who's still skeptical about unified sports even after reading your book?
Well, you know, I mean, I think one of the things I would tell the person to do really what I did, and that is go out, watch some of the games, learn about the programs, and talk to the coaches, the kids, the parents. I remember I was actually at the Catholic University about 2 years ago, and I was watching a unified sports soccer team, and the kids with intellectual disabilities were playing with a soccer team from the Madeira School. And I asked the young ladies from the Madeira School, well, what surprises you about the kids that you're playing with, the kids with intellectual disabilities? And one girl smiled and she said, they're a lot better than I thought they would be. And I think that's really one of the things that people forget, is that kids with intellectual disabilities have a lot of talent, and that it'll come out on the sports field. The other thing about unified sports that I think would remind people is that not everybody's going to be LeBron James. Very few people are LeBron James, in fact. And so what unified sports, I think, really reminds people that really what the game should be about are building your skills, learning how to be a good teammate, and having fun. And that's what I saw when I went to see the unified sport or unified basketball team.
Well, Fred, thank you for coming in today to talk about your book, Perfect Game. I'm looking forward to seeing other youth read it and you become motivated to participate in Special Olympics unified sports.
Thanks, Jordan. It was fun.